Hey YouTube, Big Hoss 762 here, out here playing with my brand new Becker BK21. This is a remake of the BK or the Reinhardt Becker Kukri, released by Ka-bar just recently, and I got it in the mail yesterday, so I thought I'd come out here and demonstrate it. I have some other big blades to compare it to. I'm going to do a chop off here, but so here's how it comes from the factory. Let me see if I can get this in frame. So as you see, Cordura nylon sheath, reinforced plastic tip there, belt loop on the back, generous size, and then it slips out the back like that. Has a smooth coating on it, as well as Hank Reinhardt's signature right there. Ka-bar logo, BK21 on the back side. I have not done anything. I haven't even reprofiled or anything. This is exactly how it comes from the factory. And the side I chose today didn't have any substantial wood. Had to walk down the hill here a little ways. And this thing's just a little bit big to be dragging up this hill, so I'm going to cut it off right about there at that chainsaw mark and just take this big trunk section here. So let's go ahead and try it out. Alrighty, let's give this a go. Oops. Finally. Even with a beastly blade like this, it takes a lot of work. Cut through a tree that size. Especially when you're out of shape and at 10,000 feet elevation. So, we'll drag this tree up this hill. Drag this tree up that hill and get to our testing. Alright guys, here's what we got to play with here today. Got a Condor Golok, Condor Bushcraft Parang. I know it's hard to see with all these sheaths and everything on them. We got a Ka-bar Parangatang, Ka-bar Grass Machete, Cold Steel Kukri Machete, the BK21, and for a baseline I have a BK4 and a BK9. So here's our setup with that log we just chopped, because it's Everything in this site is pretty small. I wanted to give something that would really try out these blades, although I'm not going to be cutting all the way through this thing every single time, because that was a lot of work cutting through it just the one time. Then I had to drag it up that hill 100 yards maybe. But yeah, still working on catching my breath actually. That was a lot of work. So, but here's our setup, our test setup here. Gonna be giving them each a few whacks and seeing how well they do. So, alrighty, so we've already seen how the BK21 cuts. Here's another one I haven't used. This is the Ka-bar Parangatang. I haven't even used it yet. I do not like this hump on the handle here, so I'll probably just grind that off. But as you can see, brand new. Haven't even used this one yet. Got a sheath for it, Kydex sheath. So let's get in here and see how this thing does. Wow. Does pretty well. I don't know if I would say it's better, but it does pretty well. Nice thin profile, full flat grind. Well, not quite a full flat grind, but pretty darn close. It's a lot lighter, so, but it also bites in deeper and gets stuck. It doesn't roll in my hand quite as much because the blade's a lot more in line with the handle, so plus the handle scales are textured. This one I have shown before. Ka-bar Grass Machete. As the name implies, they don't actually intend this for chopping wood and stuff, but at the same time, this is a really heavy blade for just cutting grass and stuff, you know. When you're chopping vegetation, you go through, it just slices right through, and then you have to stop the motion with your own arm. Like, you have to stop the swing. And so a heavy blade like this, your arm gets really tired from having to stop it all the time mid-swing. So something like this is not what I would grab for, you know, just vegetation and stuff. But let's see how it does against this log here. Well, this isn't scientific. I'm not even counting how many chops I'm doing. This feels like it's not quite as good as the 21 or the Parangatang. It's a little less expensive, but it also wants to roll in my hands a little more. And then I'm also slipping into this. You got this hook here on the handle. So you got this hook here on the handle, and my hand is slipping into it. And it's a little uncomfortable. I have to keep choking back up on it unless I put a real death grip on the thing. And if I do that, I'm gonna get blisters and stuff. So I prefer to be a little loose with it, but then your hand slips back and you gotta keep readjusting your grip because it's coming into this hook right here. Getting to be a little uncomfortable. So that's our Ka-bar offerings. Let's try Condor Golok Machete. I've done one video with this in it before. Let's see how it stacks up. Now this is a fairly heavy blade, but because of this taper to it, it's got a neutral balance to it. So, you know, not quite as bad for cutting brush and stuff. So we'll see how it does on this log. Seems to be in between the Grass Machete and the Parangatang and the 21 as far as cutting ability. It's not as tiring to swing because it's got that neutral balance to it. It seems to hit decently hard at the same time. But for sheer chopping, I think the Parangatang's a little better in the 21. Yeah. Condor Bushcraft Machete. Also shown this one before, but we'll see how she does. Alrighty. That one does pretty good too. A little bit more weight forward, so not horrible, not terribly heavy or anything, but when you've done all this chopping already, prolonged use, this is gonna be a little more tiresome than either the Golok or the Parangatang, because those are a little bit lighter. Man. But yeah, so this isn't bad. And it's a little bit lighter on the light side, so it's not horrible to swing or chop with or anything. Just for prolonged use, that heavy weight forward, you know, balance, the heavy weight forward balance will get tiring after a while. So let's set that aside and let's try out our cold steel Kukri Machete. Well, I think... Alright guys, my camera battery died on me, but hopefully we got the chopping in. So the Ontario Kukri Machete did alright. It might just be that I'm getting tired. I mean, I'm out of shape when we're probably at about 10,000 feet elevation. Maybe a little less, between 8 and 10 probably. But this felt like it did the worst out of all of the ones that I've brought so far. But it's also the cheapest and probably the lightest. So there's that. I did wrap the handle on this one. It's not factory handle. I sharpened it up, smoothed out the edge. But just to give it a fair shake, I'm going to try it a little bit more. Certainly feels like it's probably the least effective chopper out of the bunch. Like I said, it's also the lightest and the cheapest. So there's something to be said for that. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's behind by very much either. So probably one of the better values. So there's something to be said for that. Got a beast of a blade here. Condor Crocodillian Machete. If you're not familiar with this, it's shaped like a machete, but it's almost 1/4 of an inch thick. And then it has a hollow rolled handle similar to a cold steel Bushman or the Condor Bushcraft knife. The one thing I don't like about this, this handle has a taper to it, so your hand wants to slide up, you know, to about right here. So probably do an extra bit of paracord wrapping on this section up here, try and get the handle to be a little more consistent in thickness. Let's come up here, try it out a little bit. Well, I can tell you this thing is beastly. I'm getting tired. But, yeah, so definitely could use some sort of lanyard. Probably what I'll do, since this handle is hollow, is I don't know if that's showing up, but I could just run some cord through there, make kind of a D ring type guard. I think that would be a good way to go about it. And then before I do that, I'll wrap this section up here, try and get it an even thickness, because despite being flared like here, like I mentioned earlier with some of the other blades, unless you put a death grip on this thing, you're wanting to slide off. So some kind of lanyard is definitely a good idea. But if you go with that death grip, you're more likely to get blisters. So I generally prefer to be a little loose in my grip, and that's that's how what I'm led to believe is that's how the folks, you know, traditional machete users in jungles and such, that's what they do, is they gotta have a little bit of a looser grip on it and allow the knife to move around in their hand a little bit to prevent blisters. So just as kind of a control test here, I show or try out the BK9 and the BK4, even though they're not going to do near as well as the others, but this is more of a control test, I guess. Oops. So as you can see, BK9, not bad for considering it's a much smaller blade. Now the BK4. Again, similar to the BK9, does pretty good considering it's a, you know, it's a knife more than a machete, but can certainly hold its own. For funsies, I've done a separate video on this, but I haven't posted it yet. So, done its own video, but I haven't posted it yet. But this is the Ontario 14-inch butcher machete. Handles on this are kind of slick because it's it's made for cutting up large chunks of meat, cattle and whatnot, whole carcasses, you know. So, but a lot of people say they work as decent machetes, so I'll bring it in here and try it. That's pretty good. The thin profile, it gets stuck in the wood a little bit more, but it's light. It's not. It doesn't tire you out swinging it. It's got a nice thin profile, and it's not terribly expensive, so it's got that going for it. Problem is, it doesn't come with a sheath, so you know, a lot of times what I've done, just to okay. Here's another problem. These scales are just barely starting to come loose. I notice these brass pins are protruding a little bit. Maybe I can try painting them over a little bit. But these scales are starting to come loose because it's not meant to be doing this kind of stuff, you know. You could rehandle it and everything, but you know, the point is kind of to just have a less expensive alternative, and you know, for a project, if you want something to customize, this might work out well for you. But my handle scales are starting to come loose, so. And the fact that it doesn't come with a sheath. Now you can get a machete sheath, a generic machete sheath, for like 15 bucks. So it's still a low-cost alternative, but I carry it in the Grass Machete sheath since I got a Kydex sheath for the Grass Machete. So I carry I use this. Doesn't actually work very well. The retention strap doesn't hold the handle. Sorry. You know, it can come out. But just for carrying it around, testing it out like I'm doing, this works alright. There's another solution if you don't have a sheath for your machete. Cardboard and tape. Not a long-term solution, but to take it out and play with it, you know, it works. So, this is an Ontario 12-inch machete. Decently lightweight. The design's been around a long time. I also did a separate video on this, but I haven't posted it yet. But, you know, this is a pretty common tool that a lot of people have, so figured I'd throw it in here. This seems to work pretty good. You know, this nubby thing on the handle keeps your hand from sliding off, but then you tend to come down here on the handle a little bit, so you need to round this part off a little bit more because you kind of tend to slide down. But this thing, definitely a worthwhile woods tool. You know, not as good as the more expensive, heavier tools, but it'll get the job done. You know, obviously a log this size, you know, you're not going to be chopping it up into firewood. What I would do on something like this, I would chop a bunch of smaller wood, and then I would just set this over my fire pit, burn it in half, and then, you know, just let the fire take care of it for me. You know, you could burn or set an end on, burn the end, and just kind of feed it into the fire as you go. Because a log this big, you know, it's a bit large to be chopping up with machetes and stuff. You need you know, something like this is at least an axe or a large buck saw, if not a chainsaw, you know. It's a lot of work to cut up something like this. So I would definitely want to go with something smaller for just regular firewood or even shelter. I mean, unless you're building a cabin, but if you're building a cabin, you got saws and things anyway, so this is definitely a lot of work to cut up something this large, but I wanted something that would be a good test bed. A nice solid hunk that would be a little bit more consistent, although as I get tired, it's a little harder to maintain consistency. But anyway, it's more of just overall impressions. Not a real thorough shootout, I know, but it's just something to give you a little bit of a baseline to see if you really want to spend, because that BK21, we're looking at these blades here. The BK21 is almost 150 bucks. I think I paid $145 shipped. And I'm certainly, you know, I like it. I would buy it again. I think it's worth the money. Is it the best value? I don't know. I mean, with Ka-bar and Becker, you can't go wrong, because unless you're doing something totally stupid, you know, if anything does happen to it, they'll warranty it, you know, unless you're being just really abusive to it, you know, like if you're throwing it, prying with it, or something like that, you know. But if you're chopping with it, it snaps, well, then they ought to you know, it shouldn't do that, so they'll replace it. So you really don't have to worry, and it's 3/16 like a lot of the Becker knives, so this thing is beastly. There's a lot of weight up here. You notice the grind on here, lot of metal right here, so there's a lot of forward weight to it. This thing really wants to get the job done. You know, but like I said, $145 shipped. So that might not be, you might not want to spend that much, you know. I think this was like the Parangatang with the cheapo sheath. You know, this is like 60 bucks right here, but this thing here, I think it's like $85. But then again, this is getting, I think this is getting discontinued. So if you're interested, you might want to grab one quick. But, you know, does about as well. I mean, I know that I overstroke a little bit here, but, oops. I'd say these are about as well as far as sheer cutting performance goes, but Parangatang's a little bit easier to swing, a little bit lighter overall, and man, that sucker bites. And then the Grass Machete is like 60 bucks with its flimsy sheath, and then so $120 for this whole package. And you know, it's almost as good. So it's hard to go wrong with those, any of those knives. Any of the ones I've shown here, really. And then the other thing is, you know, comparing these two, these are both, these are both made in the U.S., 1095 Crow van. I mean, really, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really matter that this is Johnson and this is Becker. I mean, these are both dead even as far as materials, quality, and everything. This one's a little bit easier to use. It doesn't want to roll or slip in your hand. This one, with the other knives, it's not as bad, but I noticed with as much weight as this has, it wants to roll a little bit in my hand, and it really wants to slide out, and it starts to get uncomfortable up against this end here. The lighter knives, I don't notice that as much because they're not, this thing is so weight heavy, so forward heavy, it just slides around that much more. So this is going to be a really serious blade, you know, for folks that are going to use the snot out of it. And normally I'm not crazy. Normally I like the slick scales and everything, because like I said, I prefer to be a little bit looser on the knife and let it slide around in my hand, and I've never had a problem with blisters or anything doing that. But it just slides around a little too much, so I might have to get my cart of scales for it. So then again, you know, the sheath ain't bad, but certainly it'd be nice to have something better. But so I mean, you think about this: upgrade the sheath, upgrade the scales. The scales are another $40, $45. A sheath is going to run you 60 to 70 bucks. That's a lot of money for this once you're all said and done, ready to go, you know. Compared to this, $85, the scales are good enough. If you're like me, you don't really care for this peak right here, I'm going to end up grinding that off, so that's work that I have to do. You know, how much is your time worth? You could probably pay someone to do it, but, you know, that's more money. And then the sheath's 60 bucks, so that's 140 bucks. So I'm into this, and it's ready to go almost with a little bit of my time. Take that off of there. But, or, I mean, if it doesn't bother you, then you can just leave it. But, you know, this is how this comes out of the box. I don't know if I like it the way it is. I certainly would prefer to upgrade the sheath to something like, to a Kydex sheath. But for as much as this costs, I'm ready to go right here. So, you know, like I said, this is going to be, if you're going to be using it a lot, by all means, go for it. If you're a little more casual, then, you know, something cheaper, Kukri Machete or a Condor or something like that might be more your speed. If you're a little more casual, you know, use it a couple times a year or whatever. Or just an axe and a good knife. You know, for this kind of wood. Definitely want an axe anyway. So, it's really all about what your uses are. How you're going to use the blades and everything. So we already know these knives all chop really well. Let's try a little bam. It's a little bit flimsy. Boom, right through that. That's 3/4 of an inch. Right through it. Boom. Let's try it again. A little bit of give there. It just kind of glanced off, but I mean, if I gave myself plenty of room, this would. Boom. Yeah. Hoping this is all in frame. Like it's nothing. Just for safety's sake, we'll snap that one off. But there's a little bit of give on this, so it's not wanting to go. I mean, like 3/4 to an inch thick. If you have a backstop, if it doesn't give on you, it'll go right through it like it's no big deal. So that's the 21. Try out the Parangatang here. And as you would expect, it just goes right through everything. Bam. Cleave right through that again, about 3/4. Maybe a little thicker, but let me see if I can. No, it's got. Let's try. Yeah. That's at least an inch thick, maybe even a little more. And with a backstop, that one's a good 1.25 inches. There we go. 1¼ inch, 1.5 inch with a backstop. It'll go through it one swing. And then you could carve with it. Be a little easier to hew it like this, but you can carve with it. Now on the 21, yeah, you can carve with it. It's a little unwieldy for carving. You can hew. It's a little bit more difficult to hew with it because it's got that downward sweep, so you have to kind of get a little bit more cocked like this, whereas the Parangantang's a little straighter, so it's easier. But alrighty, Ka-bar Grass Machete. That wasn't a good hit. There we go. Bam, right through that thing. No big deal. Wham. Needs a little bit more speed, but boom, right through it. Whoops, missed. Dang. That might have been why didn't have enough speed on it, but that's probably 1¼ inch, 1.5 inch on a backstop here. Right through it. Should say I wasn't putting my full weight behind most of those swings, so that might be why it didn't perform as well as you might think. But alrighty guys, just for fun, we're going to try and make some tent stakes. Doing a tent stake's a good test of a knife's carving ability because you got a point, notches, and everything on there. So it's a nice way to try out, you know, how well a knife can carve and cut and things. So first off, right about here. Boom. 1¼ inch or so. So I guess we'll start up here. Now, I'm going pretty easy because I don't want to come up here past my hand, you know, so if you're wondering why this is going so well, it's because I'm not putting a whole lot of force behind it. One thing I learned, if you watch my BK4 Machax video, one thing I figured out is when you have knots like this, an easy way to carve them off is to go straight into them, and then you have a bunch of splinters that you can carve off instead of trying to take on the whole thing at once. See that? So I'm just going straight into it, several different directions, and then that way I'm not trying to take on the whole thing at once. And then I'm also, this gives me a little bit more control using this section back here, and then I'm not swinging, I'm almost dropping it. So, and then now I can come in here, hew it to a point, almost there. And then this will get right up in there. And I'm getting some nice shavings off of this too. So if you need to make a feather stick with this, you could. I mean, you know, obviously you probably want to go a little bit more of a taper, but you get the idea. You could carve on it, give it enough of a taper to pound it in. You know, run it off the top a little bit, and now a real tricky part is the notch. And this might be a little bit thick for a tent stake, but you know, there again, you get the idea. That would hold your cord or whatever. So, you know, it's a little bit hard because it's so heavy, but it will do it. It's nimble enough to do whatever you need to do. For a one tool option, you know, certainly there are tribes and indigenous peoples that have been doing a lot more with worse tools, so you could do it, but not my first choice. So let's go ahead and knock some branches off with the Parangatang. Bam. That's getting to be getting close to 1.5 inches there. And it went through that. Let's see here. That's a really clean slice. A slice right through that. Now, this was dead wood, but it's not totally dry, so it's a little bit soft. And also, I don't know my woods very well, so there's that. I don't know exactly what kind of, if it's dead, if it's fir or pine or whatever it is, I don't know. Seems like a soft wood, but even that I'm not positive on. But anyway, so let's try and get ourselves a point on this thing. And you can see, like, you don't have to make it to a point like a pencil. You can just slant it off one way. And then this might want to make just a little bit. There we go. That'll certainly drive in. Just to be fair, let's go ahead and take this knot off, because I did it with the 21. Okay, that wasn't entirely fair. That was a way smaller knot, but you know. There we go. Square up the top a little bit. This thing just cuts like a beast. Now, if you're not familiar on tent stakes, what I'm doing here is on the top of it where you pound it in, if you just leave a clean cut, it probably won't, I mean, it's not a huge deal if you're just doing it one time. But if you, that's probably a little bit exaggerated, but if you knock off the edge all the way around, it won't mushroom out when you pound it in. Or it should at least reduce that. So, and then finally, I'll make a notch. Yeah, this wood's soft. I think it's rained up here recently, so it's wet. Maybe even a little green still. Just for the heck of it, look, you know, I'm getting some shavings out of it. If I had a longer stick and I was trying to be a little more delicate, I could make a feather stick with this if I wanted to, or if I needed to. Yeah, not the greatest notch, but it'll hold, you know. If you're making a figure 4, you'd want to square this up a little bit, but for just a tent stake or whatever, that'd work. You can do it. And again, I think this is a little bit easier to use for that kind of stuff as well. You know, I'm thinking, this is the first time I've ever used the Parangatang too. This is a brand new knife. I did get the Kydex sheath for it, but anyway, this thing's pretty lightweight. It does have a bit of a thin profile to it. See if I can show that. You know, it's got a thin profile to it, but I mean, you've seen me chopping, haven't had any issues, but you know, you're more prone to damaging your edge, I guess, with that thin profile. So that is something to consider. We're getting a little bit thicker as we move up this branch, but let's try the Grass Machete. That was not even a solid hit. I was going for here. I hit the log, still cleaved right through this branch, although it snapped out a little bit on the back. Not a super clean cut, but did cut it. That's the important thing, is it cut. Although now we have this to contend with. So let's give this a shot. We can just hew this down. Boom, not a big deal. Clean that up real nice. Let's come in here. Bring a little bit more of a point to it. And that's probably, there we go. That'll work for, you know, again, this is just a demonstration. Of course, this chunk here, not great, but I'm going to carve my notch a little low because, again, this is just for demonstration. We don't need to do this exactly like we would if we actually needed a tent stake here. Although now, I think this one might be easier for this. Even though it's a little bit heavier than the Parangatang. Anyway, I get some shavings out of this. And if you look back at my other videos, I've done carving with this knife before, or this blade before. There's our notch. I mean, bang that out in just a few seconds with this large knife. So obviously you spend a few more seconds on there, you can get a better notch, but considering how beefy this chunk is, it's over probably 1.25 inches. You know, a little bit big for a tent steak, but there you have it. I'm not going to go through and do them with all of them, but, you know, there you go. There's your top 3 contenders. At least from Ka-bar. Well, people wanted to see how the Ka-bars stack up against each other, and there you go. I think, so between these 3, I think I like the Parangatang the best. And then the Grass Machete is a really good value. Like I said before, the 21, you know, I'm not going to say it's not worth the money. Dollar to performance ratio is going to be better, definitely better on this one, the Parangatang. And maybe better on the Grass Machete, but you know, being the huge Becker fanboy that I am, you know, I couldn't say no, even for $145. You know, I had to jump on it. It does work great, certainly worth the money, you know, no question there. But as far as the overall value goes, you might be better off with one of these two as far as dollar to performance, you know, the value there. As I showed earlier, I'm carrying the Ontario in the Grass Machete sheath. This is a Grass Machete sheath, and it's functional, it works. The 21 sheath is slightly better. It's a little bit thicker, got some plastic lining in there, I think, some kind of, you know, liner in there, and then this nice thick plastic reinforcement on the tip. Now, when I first saw this, I thought it was a Condor, or not a Condor, a cold steel Kukri Machete sheath. And it's actually, I don't have my original Kukri Machete sheath, but it looks like the same profile to me. So, but it's way better than the one that I have on my, or that came with my Kukri Machete in the first place. However, if you look back a couple years on my videos, I showed this. This is a sheath that I bought for the Kukri Machete, and it's a taco style hard kydex. And the Kukri Machete does fit in there just fine. So, you know, if you have a Kukri Machete, you're looking to upgrade the sheath, this is a nice upgrade. The belt loop is sewn on here at the top, so it's not going to flop around like the belt loop on the Kukri Machete. It is going to ride kind of high on your belt, but I generally don't belt carry something like this anyway. So that fits in there real nice. And then as a bonus, this $65 sheath, whatever I paid for it, this actually fits a lot of my blades, but it fits very nicely on the BK21. So now I have this package, you know, that works really well. You know, and it fits a lot of my knives actually, although I don't know, it doesn't fit the Grass Machete. I don't know if these guys are still making these. That fits in there alright, although I already have a custom Kydex sheath for that. But, so I'll probably trade sheaths between the Condor Kukri and my BK21. I'll let the 21 have the Kydex sheath. But yeah, so, and then, you know, something like this, just knock over all my hundreds of dollars worth of steel, whatever, just knock it over, leave it in the dirt. Hey, if I couldn't take it, what's the point of spending all that money, right? You can go on Amazon and look for a Marbles machete sheath, and it'll fit a lot of different blades too. So I've tried it with a lot of different machetes that I have. But anyway, so there's just a quick rundown. By no means a super thorough comparison, but you know, there's a nice rundown of a lot of different knives, and then particularly the three from Ka-bar, Grass Machete, Parangatang, and BK21. So, you know, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of insight into how well they work, how well the knives work, and, you know, hopefully you learned a little bit. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully in the future I'll get a chance to be a little more in-depth with these. But for right now, you know, this was a lot of effort for my fat ass. So I'm going to call it a day, but thanks for watching.